first of all, starts the psalm by screaming at God. When he says, hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness, it's imperative. He didn't just casually say, God, would you pay attention to me? He screams at God. You know, sometimes we can make God fragile, but I can promise you, God's never got offended by how any human has ever approached him. He's not upset when we say things in anger or we lash out at him. So we've been mad at God for a long time, just think he doesn't know. That's our nature. We think we're hiding things from him when he actually knows thought, intent, and all the other things of our lives. He's well aware of our frustrations at him. He doesn't, it doesn't irritate him. Now, this is one of the few Psalms that we can say David wrote because it literally says so in the beginning. This is a Psalm of David. So David is writing this Psalm. It doesn't appear to be an old man. So it's got to be someone younger in life. He's the way he approaches it, the things he says, indicates that he doesn't have a lot of maturity because he's angry at God in the beginning and then he instantly transfers that anger to men. And he says, oh, you sons of men, how long do you seek after the fame, the prestige, and you're looking for the wrong things. So when did this take place? Well, there's one good possibility. We can't define that this is exactly the exact time it took place, but when you read the story or understand the story and then you read the psalm, it just kind of fits. David was anointed king at a young age. Christians want to say that he was 15 or 16 years of age. I've read Jewish writers that say he was in his late 20s when he was anointed king. So we don't really know when it took place. But at some point in his life, before Samuel dies, and we know that when that happens, David is still a young man. He's in his 20s. If he was anointed king as a 15 or 16-year-old, and when you read the other scriptures, it kind of indicates that's a possibility because Saul calls him to his court and he plays the harp because he's very musically inclined, and then Saul becomes very jealous of him and then desires to kill him. And he couldn't have been in his 20s at that time. He was still a much younger person. So for just the sake of the story, let's just put his age somewhere between 15 and 20. So here's this kid who is anointed king and then has to spend at least 12, 14, 15, possibly 17 to 18 years of his life trying to avoid being killed. Now, he knows what Samuel did. He's very well aware. The whole town knew what Samuel did, and the news got out rather rapidly that he had done it, and here he is elevated or to be elevated to a role that he didn't ask for, but now he's got to defend himself. He has to fear for his own life. He has to instantly go on the run. Other people hear of David's conditions and men begin to join David. It wasn't long before he has what the Bible calls 600 mighty men of valor. Now David has his own army, and David could have attack Saul, going against Israel, but he didn't. However, that struggle over time began to wear on him. You know, one of the most common things I see today in trying to help people is that the things that usually start causing people severe problems are not momentary events. They're things that just keep dragging on, dragging on, and dragging on, and dragging on, and dragging on. That's David. David's life is just one constant struggle over the same issue. It's not a different struggle. It's just Saul wants him dead. And he's going to do everything in his power to make sure he is dead. No matter what God said, he's going to make sure he dies so that Samuel's prophecy can't come to pass. I'm not sure what changed David's thinking, but at some point in this story, David decides it would be much easier to live in the city where Goliath lived than it would be to live among the Philistines or among the Jews. So David takes 600 mighty men of valor, their families. One historian that I read indicated that David was fearful for his own mother and father. Now we know that Jesse was the chief justice of the Sanhedrin, and David's still fearful that Saul's going to do something to his family. So David takes his mom and dad and he takes them to the Moabites because that's where his grandmother was from. And so he takes mom and dad to live there so that Saul doesn't have access to them. And then other members of his family, his brothers, several of his nephews, they join him and become his 600 mighty men of valor and wind up at a city called Gath, talking to a king by the name of Achish. David has to feign that he is insane. He froths at the mouth and he claws at the city gates, and they come and tell the king there's this lunatic at the gate. And when the king brings him in, he recognizes David and asks him why he's trying to act insane. You don't have to do that. And David pleads his case, and Achish takes him in. He lives there for a while. Now, you got to remember that Goliath still has 3 brothers that live in the same city. There's still 3 more giants in this city. And here's David. You could almost say David was fearless. I'm not sure what you could say he was, but that just doesn't appear to me to be a good idea. You know, sometimes you make decisions that you often regret. David is now making decisions that he will regret, but he's making them because he thinks that it's justified, that you just don't understand all the problems I'm dealing with, or you don't understand all the struggles in my life. And so it's just easier to live here than to live in Judah. And so after a time, you can imagine a city that only has so many homes built in it, that here comes a man with 600 men plus wives and children, and we've got 2,000 or 3,000 people that show up now. What are we going to do with them? There's no place. You think there's a housing shortage in America? There was a housing shortage in Gath as a result of David showing up with these 600 men. And so Achish says, you know, David, there's another town not far from here that's kind of empty. And if you'd take your men there, we'll give you that city. And we won't only give you that city, we're going to make you like we are. You're going to become a prince of the Philistines. So David takes 600 men, and they moved to Ziklag. And there they set up residence. Now David never stops fighting the enemies of Israel other than the Philistines. From Gath, he launches multiple raids that the scripture indicates into other areas of people who were causing Israel problems, and he keeps fighting battles and wars. But one day, he gets a message. And the message is that the Philistines are going to war. Now, the enemy is not hidden. The enemy that the Philistines is going to fight is known by everybody. The enemy is Israel. So now David is put in a position, his choices, maybe I'm doing part 2 of Sunday night, all right? His choices put him in a position that now he's going to have to do something he would have never done. And that's touch God's anointed. Some decisions put us in places where it makes it real difficult to not join an enemy. Our world's given us all kinds of abilities today to do that. And I know I've been told I'm an old man on a soapbox. I recognize that, and looking in the mirror this morning, I identify. I am the old man. But it doesn't matter how old I am. Somebody's got to be a watchman on the wall and say, pay attention. There's just too many things becoming accessible to us that opens doors for you to make decisions you would have never made before. See, anything that's got private stuck on it is usually a bad sign, especially when it has to do with family, where the other members of the family have no clue what you're doing. So anytime we open that door that allows us to start down roads that we can hide things from other people, it starts creating issues. Trust starts becoming a problem. People around us start becoming suspicious, no matter what kind of relationship we have. If they keep knowing that, okay, what are you keeping from me? What are you not letting me know? So here's David. And now he's got to make a decision. What am I going to do? Well, Achish, I promised you that you protect me, I'm going to take care of you. And David literally becomes Achish's bodyguard. And he promised him that for the rest of your life, as long as you live, I'll be your bodyguard. Now, the Philistines only were tolerating David because he wasn't causing them any problems. That was one of those things that the friend of my enemy is my friend kind of things. Yeah. Here's David now. What am I going to do? And he joins. Takes his 600 mighty men of valor. They arrive at a place. We don't know how long the journey took. The scripture does declare and does say that when Saul saw the army of the Philistines, he was terrified. The number of them that showed up. So they had to have been there for a while. We know it's 3 days from where they are to where David was at, because that's how long it took him to get home. But we don't have a clue when he left and how long he had been there. They had been there long enough that they set up camp, and at some point they started arranging themselves according to their order, and the chiefs of cities or the princes or kings of the cities would bring their men, and they were all in rank and file, and they were all being paraded in front of each other, and David with Achish was in the back. And somehow they noticed, those look like Hebrews. Now, can I ask the question, how could they recognize them as being Hebrews? Did they look that much different? No, because they're all connected to Abraham or Esau or some descendant there in some form or another. So what made them look different? The way they dressed. It's always been the identifying factor when you're looking at God's kids. They've always been able to distinguish them by, they could tell Jesus was a rabbi. How? They didn't hear him say anything. The woman at the well perceived he was a rabbi, and he hadn't said a word to her yet. How'd she see that? Clothes. The way he dressed. Identified him. So, what's he doing here? Who is this? And Achish doesn't answer the question, he asks a question, which is actually a sign of dysfunction. Dysfunctional families don't answer questions, they just ask more. So when the other king said, who is this? He said, isn't this David? It's a question. It's not, this is David. It's, isn't this David? And they start then asking other questions. Is this the same guy that they sing about, that Saul killed his thousands, but David killed his 10,000? Oh yeah, he's my friend. Wouldn't you like him to be your bodyguard? A man who has this kind of abilities, wouldn't you want him on your side? No, we don't think he ought to be here. Send him home. Make him leave. Now, when you look at the whole story, what made David so brazen that he didn't think it important to leave somebody to watch over his family? Why didn't they leave a group to watch their city? It was a known fact of that day, the first time that they caught people out of a city and the army's gone, that's when other nations or other cities attack them. Did he just presume that God was going to protect him regardless of his decisions? You know, I've had that question asked to me hundreds of times, probably thousands. Why God let this happen to me? If God really loves me the way you say he does, why did he let this happen? So apparently David just assumed God was, you don't have to leave nobody to watch over anybody else. And they left the whole city vulnerable. Go home. Now David gets mad. He said, I promised you I wouldn't do anything wrong. I promised you all these things. I've fulfilled my word. Yes, David, you have. And there's an old manuscript that kind of has a little addition to this story that Achish tells David, you need to go home, but you also don't need to have any bad feelings towards us over this event. So David takes his men and leaves. It's the break of day. So what David didn't understand is at the time they're having this discussion, Saul is in the home of a witch. And Saul is asking this witch to bring Samuel back from the dead. And Samuel gives Saul horrible news. Tomorrow, you're going to die. Your kids are going to die. Your army's going to be totally destroyed tomorrow. And Saul lays on the ground terrified. He's terrified when he saw all the Philistines. Now that judgment showed up, he's terrified again. And now David leaves. Before he can get home, if he leaves at the break of day, somewhere in that day as the battle started and Saul dies, David's still headed home. He has no idea. He doesn't know the news. The news gets there about the time he gets back. Now he gets home. What's he discover? He discovers that they've lost everything. The city's burned to the ground. All that's left are the stone walls and the stone buildings that hadn't been destroyed by fire. If fire gets hot enough, that limestone that they use in the Middle East to build out of will actually catch on fire and burn. So it's gone. And his men begin to grieve. 1 Samuel chapter 30 describes the grief. As they are grieving in this intense fashion, their grief is so powerful that they don't have any strength. They're exhausted. They can only imagine that their wives have been murdered, their children have been murdered. They don't have a clue where they're at. They're not in the city. They can't find any bodies. But you know what there's plenty of? Stones. And those 600 Jewish men picked up stones. And they start approaching David. Now, David's not 30. He's 30 when he becomes king, so he's in his 20s at this point, 29. So 600 men approach with stones. And they're ready to stone him. David, you caused all of this. First of all, you didn't pray. You didn't ask God. Everything we've done before this time, you've always inquired the Lord, should we do this? And God's always give you direction. But you made a decision today that had no prayer involved in it. Now, we've lost everything, and it's your fault. And David, you don't deserve to live. Some of those men are his brothers. Some are his nephews with stones. And 1 Samuel 30 says David encouraged himself in the Lord. And that appears to be the setting for this psalm. Hear me when I call, O God of my righteousness. Men are angry at him. He's angry at God. Why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you let me know this wasn't a good decision? You know, I'm convinced after all of the experiences I've had in my life that nobody ever makes a bad decision they don't know is bad. None of us just slip up and do something we have no clue that's going to cause the consequences. There's something in us that tries to speak, and we don't let it. It's trying to point out, this is not a good idea. This is dangerous. This is going to cause issues. Don't. We just ignore it. So David screams at God, and notice what God does to David. He didn't get even. He didn't ridicule him. He didn't belittle him. He didn't mock him. He didn't say anything harsh or ugly to him. Now, us humans, we got a real problem with that because we love to say, I told you so. We love to say, if you'd listen to me, this wouldn't happen. I knew you'd do that. God's not saying that to David. What does the psalm indicate God did? What's the next statement? Thou hast what? Enlarged me when I was in distress. Do you see what God did? God just reached into David's mind and started tripping memories. David, do you remember a bear? David, you remember your family sent you to all those places where all these animals were at, hoping you'd be destroyed because you had brought shame to their family, to the family. And remember the lion, the bear? And then notice how he described, thou hast enlarged me when I was in distress. You led me into a wide open space. One translation says, you built the door where there was no door to get out. Then he repents. Have mercy upon me and hear my prayer. O ye sons of men, how long will you turn my glory into shame? How long are you going to look for the lies and the deception, and that's all you're interested in? How long? And then notice what he says. The Lord will hear the righteous. But then notice, I think it's verse 4. Stand in what? Awe and what? Sin not. The word awe means to tremble violently with rage, to be so angry that your whole body shakes. Now, as a kid, I remember a few of those episodes that terrified me so bad I promised myself I'd never do it again, and I never did it again because Charles is not here, but I could have easily took him out one day. I did knock him unconscious. That terrified me. So after that day, a kid would say, no more anger like that, and would walk away. I was an adult. I was 9 years of age. But the terror of what I did, I didn't want to ever live through that again. So anger can put you in a rage. Be angry and sin not. Question is, when is anger a sin? Anger is only a sin when you use it as a weapon to attack somebody. God put it in us to make sure we were protected. It's God-given. He gives us anger so that we will protect our homes, our families, our children, ourselves. It's to let us know we're in danger. Our world's never taught us to focus on the cause. It's taught us to enjoy the thrill. The world understands how thrilling and how addictive these two emotions are. And so everything around us is based on it. When Anthony and Jill were in their middle teens, they convinced us to take them to Astroworld. They just created this new ride. It was, if I remember correctly, it was at the gate. You come over that bridge, and as you walk down, there's this thing that went, big round pipe, went straight up in the air about 150 feet. Off the top was steel plate and channels welded and pulleys and cables and cages with a bicycle seat in it. And you'd sit on that seat, and the cage would come over and take you up, and when it got top, it'd go, whoop, whoop, whoop. On the third whoop, it'd turn it loose, and you'd free fall. And just before you hit the ground, they'd put the brakes on. If you didn't have ruptured or herniated disc in your life, there's no way you could ride it without coming out with some kind of damage. It's falling too fast, and the brakes come on too fast. So Anthony decides he wants to ride it. And he tries to challenge me to ride it. And I said, Anthony, I really don't need that in my life today. Come on, Dad, I want to ride it. Anthony, I don't need that in my life. Oh, Dad, you're not a man if you'll ride it. You can call me what you want. I'm not riding this ride. If you want to ride it, go get in line. I'll wait. I don't know where Leanne and Jill were at. They were somewhere else, but it's just the two of us. And so he went and got in line. Hour and a half. Now, he waited in line. I got to watch the entertainment for an hour and a half. Every one of those seats had a camera on it, and they videoed you going up and videoed you coming down. And if you were brave enough, you could buy it when you got through. So I'm standing here watching, and right at the entrance to get in line, there's a huge sign. It's got at least 20 items on it of diseases or physical conditions. If you don't get on this ride. And I'm standing here watching, and I watched two people get on that ride, and I'm thinking, surely you're lost. Surely you're not going to try to ride this thing. And then the more I watched, the more I realized they're going to do it. So I decided I'm going to watch. So I watch as they make their way. Anthony gets on his, he rides it, he gets off. I said, you want to do that again? He said, no, Dad, I don't need to do that again. That once was enough. He said, let's go. I said, no, we're going to wait a minute. He said, why? I said, look over there in line. And when he saw what I was pointing at, he said, Dad, they're not going to ride this, are they? Yeah, they're going to ride it. Let's watch. So now he agrees to stand here 15 minutes while they get through the line and get to chair number 8 and 9. I still remember those numbers. And this wasn't Grandma and Grandpa getting in line. This was great-grandma and great-grandpa. They had at least 5 of the diseases listed, I can promise you. So she was number 8. He's beside her. And you could watch them talk to each other and encourage you. This is going to be fun. This is going to be a blast. And they took off. Got to the top. And when the trigger tripped, she nearly lost her false teeth. They're half out of her mouth and half in her mouth. Her eyes are the size of saucers, and she's screaming, but her mouth can't be open. And he sounds like a little kid screaming at the top. And he's saying things, I promise you, that he didn't want his kids saying. And they scream all the way down. Brakes come on. They get off. And we're standing watching. We want to see the reaction of what's going to happen now. You would have thought she would have looked at him and said, well, we just lost the last 10 years of our lives. So she looked at him and grinned real big. Said, you want to do it again? And they got back in line. So your world has taught you how to use anger and fear as a drug of choice. And we have no clue we're in danger. We have no clue what we let in our homes, in our relationships. Because that adrenaline rush, we become adrenaline junkies. We need the high that happens as a result of what the world has given us the opportunity to enjoy. So danger shows up and we just think it's a party. Time to laugh, time to have a good time. And then chaos happens and then we're confused. How could chaos take place when we're having such a good time? It's real easy to deceive ourselves. The Word of God is the roadmap to life. I can deceive myself into thinking I'm a Christian, but I don't act like Jesus at all. According to what I read, if I don't act like him, that's what Jesus said. Hereby shall they know you are my disciples. How? John chapter 8. You will obey my commandments. That's the definition. Not what our world throws out and we just accept. America is in so much danger right now. Not from outside, but from inside. And it's all this junk that we continually let in our lives that no one seems to think, well, how can there be a problem there? Just chaos after chaos. So we become adrenaline junkies. We don't know the danger that our world's in, our lives are in. And David got there. He put 600 men in jeopardy. Now he realizes, you know what, I might ought to listen to my conscience. Be angry, but don't let your anger become sin. Commune with your own, listen to your conscience. The Hebrew language has no word for conscience, so they refer to the heart. Commune with your own heart. New Testament would be your conscience upon your bed. Selah, stop, pause, think about it. When I talk to people all over America and I start dealing with the topic of a conscience and listening to it and paying, if I had a GoPro right here that you could see the faces of what people look like when I address these things, it's like, you mean I need to be listening to something that's trying to warn me? I'm not talking about the world. I'm talking about Pentecostals sitting on Pentecostal pews that just don't have a problem. Don't think there's an issue or any kind of things that we need to pay attention to. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Selah. Notice the next verse. Offer the sacrifice of what? Righteousness. What's the sacrifice of righteousness? Is that a lamb? Bullock? Is it a sheep? Turtle dove? Oil? What's the sacrifice of righteousness? What is it? There's not one. So you just have to look at what the word is. It's the sacrifice required to do the right thing. What does it cost you to do the right thing? To do the right thing? See, David's got a problem here. If you've noticed, I have belittled his age. I mean, not belittled, but I have reminded you of his age on a regular basis here tonight for a reason. How old is he? He's 29. How long was he king? 40 years. So, how many battles did he fight? How many times did he go to war? On a regular basis, because there come a point where his men said, David, you can't fight no more because you've lost a step, and there's some giants that those people that we used to live in that town, they're out for you. They want your head. And 3 other men took out 3 giants. So how old's David? He's 29. Is he going to fight again? Yeah. Now he's got a problem. Or not necessarily, he could have a problem. See, the problem he could have is every time he said charge and they start a battle, he has to see 600 men with stones. So what are you going to do about the stones? They had them in their hand. They were about to stone him when he started singing. So what are you going to do about the stones? See, now he's got the sacrifice of righteousness caused him to have to see the man, not what was in his hand. When people hurt you deeply, it's going to cost you a lot to not see the stone in their hand, but to see the man. Are people going to hurt you? Absolutely. Jesus prophesied, it is impossible, but that offense will come. Everybody in this room will be offended. And when he prophesied who would do it, it's not stranger, it's not neighbor, it's not boss, it's brother. It's family. So when family offends, are you going to see the person or the stones? See, we've got this idea that we've been taught, I'm not sure where it came from, that I'll forgive, but I don't forget. No, that's not correct. You will forgive, and then you'll choose to see the person and not the stones. Because the memory will never go away. It's not going to disappear. I'm not going to get a different outcome or a different result. That memory is permanently etched in my mind. And it is so etched that the brain literally disintegrates the memory into parts. All the visual parts are stored in one part of the brain. All the auditory parts are stored in another. All the taste is in another. All the smells in another. All the senses are stored in different locations of the brain. And when the memory is triggered, it goes and finds all those pieces and puts them right back together. And you get the same experience thinking about it that you experienced enduring it. So when the memory comes back, if you cried, you'll cry again. If you smiled, you'll smile again. If you laughed, you'll laugh thinking about it. Whatever you stored, it's permanent. It don't go away. And our world kind of gave us this fantasy that you don't have to worry about none of that. You don't have to deal with any of that. When the fact is, to be like Jesus, you can't see the stones. You got to see the man. Remember a lady caught in the act of adultery? Where'd they bring her? They brought her to the temple. That's where Jesus was at. Throw her at his feet and demand he punish her. Moses, in his law, said she should be stoned. What do you say? They didn't even admit the law came from God. They just said Moses in his law says she should be stoned. What's your judgment? Jesus didn't say anything. He just stooped, rolled on the ground as though he heard them not. And when they heard it, he didn't say a word. But their conscience, he did to them what he did to David. He tripped some memories, and they start remembering all those things they had done. And he said he without sin cast the first stone. And they couldn't because their conscience caused them a problem. And they left from the oldest to the youngest. And Jesus keeps teaching. And then he makes this incredible statement, you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And they instantly said, wait a minute. We're Abraham's kids. We've never been servants to nobody. They just forgot 400 years of Egypt, 70 years of Babylon, 100 years of the Greek and Ptolemies, 300 years of Rome, and they've never been servants to nobody. And then Jesus kept talking, and they picked up stones to stone him. Where are they at? They're in the temple. They're not outside by the gate. In the temple. I started doing research. They never stockpile stones in the temple. The only way stones got in the temple, you listening to me? The only way stones got in the temple was the first crowd that showed up with them. Now, I'm going to bother you right now. You better be real careful what you bring to church, because it becomes weapons for somebody else if you leave them there. Jesus had to vanish from their midst or they would have stoned him that day. So my attitudes and my behaviors I show up here with, and then I start feeling the conviction, and God starts talking to me about what I'm seeing. Am I seeing the person, or I'm seeing what they're trying to do to me? And you don't believe we got a problem with this? Then just how many people you know get on Facebook and lay into somebody else and just say all these horrible things about what people are, what they do on a regular basis, and go to church and call themselves a child of God? How often does that happen? Probably tonight after church. Because I know I've irritated several people. That GoPro would give you a revelation real quick if I just stuck it here. So we don't like anybody to confront us with our life and our behaviors and our lifestyles, our choices. So we bring junk to the house of God that don't need to be left here. It needs to be taken and disposed of somewhere else so somebody else is not tempted to use it in justifying their behavior for why they're doing what they're doing. Does the Bible talk much about stumbling blocks? It's a New Testament doctrine, I can tell you that. It's in there multiple times. What produces these stumbling blocks? People. Attitudes, what I think I have a right to do, or what I think I have a right to say. See, our world has equipped us with every resource necessary to become as narcissistic as we choose to be. And unfortunately, it's not getting better. Narcissism is just causing us all kinds of problems because it's about me and my needs. And, you know, I rarely, an old man has no filter, okay? I said that last time. That rarely do I ever finish without hearing someone want to talk to me, and the way they approach the subject I've addressed is, I really enjoyed what you had to say, but you got a reason why you don't have to get rid of stuff that we always got a but. I'm justified in the way I feel or what's happening. I'm justified. There's no reason I can't be this way. Yes, there is. See, I've heard some ridiculous stories over the last 40 years, and some of them I just shake my head out and think, are you really listening to what you're saying? When a parent has no clue why a kid won't have nothing to do with them, but yet will tell you why. You know, I'm 57 years old. I've got a right to say what I want to say. Well, yeah, that is true, but that don't mean it's a good idea. Jesus never used anger on anyone except those who were preventing people from getting to him. He called the Pharisees whited sepulchres. Why? Because they made it impossible to get to God. See, the Jews had got to this place in life, they thought God was so holy that man could never approach him. And Jesus came and said, no, God is not so holy you can't approach him. Actually, God's desire is, in my Father's house, there's going to be many, that word is oikos, which means dwelling places. In my Father's family, there's going to be many dwelling places. And if I go away, then I'm going to send the Comforter. And the Comforter, it's not just going to help comfort you, but it's going to be inside of you. As the Father is in me, I'm going to be in you, and you're going to be able to recognize the uniqueness of this relationship just because of what you saw and heard of me when I come to live inside of you. So God gets real irritated at any of us who prevent people from getting to him. How do we do that? Stones. We see the stone. You don't know what they did to me. You don't know what they said to me. You don't know how they mistreated me. There's a few of those stories going around here. It's amazing what you overhear in conversations. Yeah. Kids won't have nothing to do with me and just go from one to another telling the same story over and over again. Stones. I got to be careful that I don't see the stone and I got to pay the price. And the price of not seeing the stone is seeing the value of the person. Remember what Jesus said in Luke chapter 17, if your brother offend thee, rebuke him. If he repent, forgive him. Remember what I taught you about rebuke? Rebuke is not to chastise and make him feel worthless. It's epitamios, or tamio, it's a verb, which means to discover, uncover, or to place value on someone else. So when you get offended, Jesus said, what I want you to do is to make them feel like they're the most valuable person alive. Now, all you extroverts, that don't bother you in the least bit. All of us introverts, that's a problem. You do something to me, I can tell you date, time, and place. I keep records. But no, Jesus said, no, you say you're going to be like me, then there's no records. You mean if she irritates you, I don't have a right to remind her repeatedly that, you know, you did this? No, I don't. Not if I'm going to say I'm Jesus, I'm a Christian, say I'm like him, then I'm going to make her feel like she's the most valuable person alive. See, if you don't see the person, then all you will remember is the stones, and you'll never discover how valuable they are. Has anybody heard God say, oops? Does God make broke things or defective things? If my son was here, he'd be doing this number, which would indicate I've gone way too long, because that's what he's done since he was a little kid when I was preaching. It's amazing what's in this book. It is the bread of life. It truly is the bread of life. It truly teaches us how to have the best home, best family, best relationships we possibly can have. But the only way you can ever enjoy any of those is never see stones. You got to see the person. Please stand. Gracious Father, thank you today for your incredible word, which truly is the lamp unto our feet. It is the light unto our pathway. Lord, I pray today that your word will be forever settled in our hearts. We will hide it there, because it is only through your word that we don't offend you, we don't cause problems in our relationship with you. It keeps us from sinning against you. Your word should be the most valuable thing in our lives. So Lord, help us to fall in love with your word all over again, and let it consume every part of our life. That our conversations that we have, there would be no greater conversation talking about the incredible truths of your word and the things hidden in it. Bless homes today. Satan's desires to destroy every home represented here today, not just with the parent, but grandparents, great-grandparents. If he could cause chaos, then he's wrecked the church, which then wrecks society, the city, the state, the nation, as a result of broken homes. Help us, Jesus, to remember the importance of not seeing men ready to kill me, but seeing them as my family, my nephew, my brother, my friends, and loving them as you loved us. Bless every heart and life here tonight. In Jesus' name. Worship him a moment. Lord Jesus, thank you. We bless you today. We bless you today. We bless you today. The Lord bless you tonight. Greet one another in the lovely name of the Lord. You're dismissed.